foundational user technical drivers for the legacy systems evolution. There is a chapter 3 in the guide outlines the approach to enable SOA, legacy evolution to SOA, that's in alignment with TOGAF architecture development methods. Legacy systems, as we know, comes in all varieties, coded in different languages, technologies, and utilize CART solutions from different vendors. Therefore, not all transformations or enablement of projects are the same. But the TOGAF ADM process provides a mechanism to do this architecture development and transformation projects in a seamless manner. When combined with TOGAF SOA guide, this approach provides the foundational process for this transformation engagements. Next chapter, chapter 4, provides an overview of sets of best practices in a variety of legacy to SOA evolution aspects. So what are key principles and aspects regarding legacy systems which needs to be taken into account for this evolution journey? And like any transformation engagement, legacy to SOA also require key operational performance indicators or metrics to ensure continuous communication and justification of this journey to ensure visibility to any stakeholders. It starts with the baseline KPI, key performance indicators, and measure them at appropriate intervals to effectively communicate the progress made in the transformation. The guide finds some of the key transformation strategies to enable the process of modernization, modernizing the applications using SOA. Enterprises need to select one of these strategies and evaluate against their strategies. It recommends to leverage the enterprise integration patterns in a graceful transition from legacy systems to a more organized and integrated set of coexisting systems. What impact of legacy system evolution has on the current organization structures and processes. The guide also highlights an approach to develop a new skill sets to require to evolve the systems and plan for those evolution and transformations to SOA. Lastly, the guide provides guidance to assessing the security aspects of legacy systems and the way to secure the information in the transformation systems. The document ends with some of those detailed descriptions of 2 legacy to SOA case studies, including recommendations of how to improve those specific journey based upon this guide. I think next slide, please. I think when my co-presenter used is going to describe some of the drivers and legacy modernizations. So please go ahead.
Thanks, Jay. And what's important is that in the remainder of the slides, we will focus on a few of the topics that Jay showed in the table of contents. I write you an overview of what's inside the guide. And it's no surprise that actually the guide starts with drivers for legacy modernization, drivers and concerns for legacy modernization, as that is mostly the starting point for types of engagement. The concern that can be a driver, and we need to do something. We actually, with the members in the project, we inventorized the kind of drivers in these type of engagements. Actually group them into business, functional, usability, and technical drivers. And that will also later on relate to basis in an architecture engagement. For some of these drivers, if you look at the business, and I will just mention a few of those drivers, is that you see that some change applications can take quite a long time. influencing the time to market. Slow time to market as a result. Another type of concern that we see in business is that the legacy systems, it's quite difficult to metrics, how they actually perform in business processes, how to get those metrics and analytics from legacy systems. And cost is increasing as a result of that. If you look functional, we are looking more at how these applications and how the data is actually being used. There's replication in legacy systems. As a result, data is redundantly stored, but it's also difficult to get real-time information. So we need to go, in various cases, towards near real-time or real-time and accurate information. Of course, all on functional level, it's got difficulties to reuse. The reusability is difficult as a functional driver. It's not only about how these applications can be reused or integrated, it's also usability for end user. Integrating legacy systems in Web 2.0 technologies like portlets, portals, but also integrate with media, social technology is difficult. And that's where integrations or contact to the customer is needed for now. On a technical level, we also have to look at that level. For example, the fact data might be stored in files and not in actual databases. And storing the data in files might be hard to access by other functionalities, hard to scale. Actually, if we need to scale to much more users or much more external parties. Also on a technical level, we see drivers like embedded logic. Embedded logic in the application, like business rules, security, authorization rules as part of the application business logic, which was quite normal some time ago. Also integration logic like point-to-point connections, deeply inside these applications. And we on top, of those drivers. And in summary, if you look at them, if you look at different types of legacy modernization projects, you see that maintenance costs are getting higher and higher. There's no surprise. If you want to reuse functionality and get in the same type of systems now, it will even higher. Difficult to get control over the application landscape and especially its dependencies, how these applications relate, but also how these applications relate to business processes. Business wants to change faster than IT can support. And this is actually where S is coming into the picture, a possible answer on some of these drivers and concerns that we identify. But these concerns are not meant to diminish the value of these systems they represent. As T introduced, business and mission critical systems are running on legacy systems. But we all see these trends in summary, and we believe that we can do something about them. Later on in the presentation, TJ will provide an overview how to use this guide, and you can actually use the drivers as a reference and see how that matches in your engagement. Slide, please. As TJ already introduced, if you look at the TOGAF ADM, the Architecture Development Method, it's a process to facilitate and manage architectural development and transformation. And legacy modernization is all about transformation. You combine that, the TOGAF SOA guide, the practical guide, that really provides the foundational process for L to SOA transformation engagements. And what we actually did is we looked at these various phases and focused on specific aspects that are important in the SOA context within the TOGAF ADM. And that means that you will see in the guide per phase a specific legacy to SOA attention points. So it extends the guidance in the TOGAF SOA guide and ADM. provide a couple of examples of that, not the whole list, but you'll see some of those aspects in the blue boxes. One of the things is, for example, in preliminary phase, it's important to have a assess the SOA readiness of the organization, but all about the current legacy landscape. One of these results will be an assessment of the so-called SOA state of the legacy architecture, baseline used in the cycles in the architecture. And if we look at the architecture vision, thing was immediately clear within our project group. It's all about business case. It's cost reduction and make sure that we have return on investment. And that's not always easy. But a business case is really a mechanism to support more realization of this process, of the investment being made and a stakeholder buy-in. It also means that we have to work with metrics. And we have a set of metrics defined in the guide which might be useful. If you look at the architecture definition phases, let's look at phase business architecture, information systems architecture, and technology architecture, which is all about defining current state and defining target state. In the current state, it's a matter of tell us in detail what the state and where the legacy systems are, and especially how they relate to the business processes. Because what we will see later is that we cannot only focus on technology, because legacy transformation is a transformational program. We know how it relates to the business. If you later on and you look at, for example, the planning on how to plan this transformation, the SOA transformation, all within a larger architecture engagement, there are things that are important. One of them is that we need to distinguish between actually the SOA infrastructure, the enterprise bus or specific adapters, messaging, etc., versus the applications itself. So we need to put those in the right sequence in a planning to make sure we can actually SOA enable those applications. What's also important is that the SOA maturity level of an organization, we can actually plan legacy modernization, legacy to SOA evolution according to the SOA maturity level. If the maturity level is already high, we can much better able to open up legacy systems when it's not there. So then we might have to start first with the SOA infrastructure. And we will see that later on, it's all about governance. It's a national program, so we have management of change, not of technology, but also of people and processes. A quick overview of some of these aspects that are important in these phases. Refer to the guide to learn more about that. Then we go to the next slide, and I hand over to TJ.
Thank you. When we were talking, or when Jules was talking about the ADM process in the architecture vision phase, we have to define some of the key architecture principles, and we leverage the SOA principles for the transformation, since we are transforming the legacy systems into SOA. And some of those principles which we believe, or actually the guide has highlighted, is our principle that needs to be accounted for during the transformations. It needs to be well-defined service contracts. The service interactions must be well-defined and possibly with a widely supported industry standards. It has to be loosely coupled services. Service requester and consumer shouldn't have any knowledge about any service implementation details and how to interact with and they should only interact by the service contracts. Legacy systems can be migrated or replaced by other technologies without affecting the service. Therefore, service requester is totally decoupled or loosely coupled with the service providers. Define services with appropriate granularity. Services granularity should be easier for service requester to assemble different types of services to execute their business scenarios. It is only targeted to achieve the business agility. So, to really, having some new requirements or new business needs, you can totally assemble some existing services and possibly create new services and create a new business needs or address new business needs. Designed for statelessness, services invocations must be independent of the state of other services with many functional intertwining, or it has to be managed in such a way that you are really requiring for internet connectivity in a stateless manner. Ensure services has appropriate security enforcement and also adopt SOA ontology or vocabulary standards. Those standards really ensures that the enterprise has a common understanding between the business and IT community to effectively manage the SOA life cycle of the services. Next, please. So there are some of the metrics which might be considered for this legacy to SOA journey. Metrics are essential for the continuous communications and the justification of legacy to SOA engagement. Enablement describes how we could expose the underlying data or information to the service consumers. The metrics also help in terms of application usage. If you baseline those before the transformation and compare it with after the transformation, is really a way to really provide the justification of legacy to SOA engagement. Cost reduction maintenance would be what is the impact of transformation on maintenance and licensing and energy consumptions. This could also include some kind of intangibles cost, for example, business readiness to launch new solutions or systems. Functional reusability aspects of transformations compared with the baseline functional use before the transformations. A revenue-generated matrix would allow you to provide additional revenue. Some metrics that would be providing information about additional revenue generated with the transformed SOA services. Time to market, as I discussed earlier, with intangibles, that you can create new solutions by promoting core and extended functional solutions or services. Second, data protection enhancement are also important metrics because those really, if you compare with the baseline and making sure there is no new incidents or any reported, other impact to the existing business needs as existing business usage are being impacted with the transformation. So these metrics are really providing a way to justify the continuous journey as well as to ensure that the business is running as smoothly as possible during the transformation. Next, please. So, there are a few modernization strategies we have documented in the guide. The format of this is each of these strategies would have what approach you could take, what kind of problems or solutions or value added this strategy would be providing, and what could be a risk and how do you mitigate those risks, and what are the architecture building blocks involved in that strategies. So in terms of modernization strategies, you are enabling the process of modernization of legacy solutions applications using SOA. Enterprise need to select some of these, or maybe combination of these, in their transformation journey. These like a service enablement, a language transformation, which converting or migrating the programming language such as COBOL to Java. Re-architect strategy is to enable services based on service-based solutions by re-architecting and applying the SOA architecture style. Rehosting of legacy applications is to but applications are dispersed in multiple locations, and you have to consolidate into an environment and possibly deploy in a cloud computing environment. So these are the strategies we actually highlighted in the guide. Next slide, please. A little bit brief synopsis of one of those strategies, how those are being laid out in the guide. Service enablement is an approach. Approach is to access the legacy applications through service hosted by integration platforms and or service containers. Problems could be faced during the transformations are documented, for example, reuse and leverage existing assets while protecting huge investment made in legacy applications. In value of core applications by using SOA. Legacy functionality in an automated business processes spanning across multiple systems and departments. What could be risk and how do you mitigate them? It would be difficult to identify useful legacy functionality to be leveraged. Mitigations may be the detailed business process analysis and mapping of those. Poor documentations also could lead to unknown functionality versus clear service interfaces. System transformations may be disruptive, so proper analysis needs to be happening to make sure that the impact on organizations' process and technologies are fully assessed. And what kind of architecture building blocks are involved in this modernization strategy? It could be information service systems architecture, which is phase C of the ADM process, new information system services, and providing legacy systems functionalities in a service-oriented manner. Tech architectures would have integrations platforms and that are connected with the legacy systems. And also, service container hosting different services, and you may have different containers that might be utilized on it. Next slide, please. So, just please go ahead for the patterns.
Yeah. So besides these modern strategies, we also looked at the use of enterprise integration patterns, relevant enterprise integration patterns, considering what we're enabling. So they provide the capabilities actually to enable legacy applications. I'm not going into too much detail about the patterns itself. Most of you will be familiar with them. What we talked about it was to map them on the matrix of cost and complexity. And what you actually see is that if you look at directly related SOA patterns like Service Bus or redesign SOA, enablement are on a high cost and medium to high complexity. But the result of it is on a supported infrastructure on an enterprise or solution level. While they go to like screen scraping or queue-based mediation, it's more or less system or provider-based. So when we talk about this in the project group and we mapped it based on all our experience, we actually concluded that if you look at SOA enablement and by these directly SOA-related patterns, you see that SOA enablement in the context of the enterprise as a whole, and not only on individual systems And if you do that, you can actually spread the costs much more across multiple service-enabled applications. And not only legacy, also new, because the software structure also integrates both legacy and new. And that can only be accomplished if you do this from an enterprise architecture perspective. Of course, from a bottom-up perspective, you can focus on a system to use SOA to enable the openness of that legacy system when there is a direct need for it. But it's advised from the project group to look at it from a solution or enterprise level. And that also means that the cost can actually be shared. Next slide, please. It's only about technology. Of course, we talk a lot about technical aspects. We have also discussed, and that's very important from a holistic perspective, the effects on organization and process. And a few of them I will mention. Often SOA enable one legacy system, but you will mostly see that you need to handle it as a transformation program. Because it's not only about system, it's also about process, it's also about people, and it's also about governance. So that's very important. You're learning because new technologies enter the landscape. Learning from a design development perspective, but also from a management perspective. And managing an SOA structure is different than managing legacy systems or any other system. So you will have to see that you will get new roles. The management of change to guide that. It can be an opportunity for people, but it can also be a threat, at least if people have been in a technology for a long time. To introduce these new components and also opening up systems, other systems than before, and other business processes, the change request procedures need to be extended. That's absolutely the time to make organizational wide. It has not been implemented yet. Adding the concept of services implemented across business boundaries, that also means that current governance roles, maybe on application level, they might need to change. So we have a change program for them. We talk about SOA competence centers when we talk about SOA. Legacy needs to be included in that, or maybe even a dedicated legacy competence center when there are a lot of business critical systems on it. And it's all return on investment. So it's really important to work on that, to detail that more. Next slide, please. A little bit more detail on the governance framework. Look about these changes, and also if we talk about requests like functionality that need to change, what life cycle. Life cycle is all about governance. We took a look at the open group SOA governance framework and at the specific legacy touch points. And there are touch points already in the governance framework, and we highlighted them in this part in the guide. And what is really important is that you also need to create guidelines, like legacy modernization guidelines. So what patterns are we actually going to use? How are we going to implement those patterns? So we need to work those guidelines, which could be architectural deliverables or the first thing that needs to be done when projects start. You more like process, analyze where the legacy functionality is, make sure it's in the design, so there's a transparency, exactly what legacy functionality is being exposed by what service and how are these services related to each other. It's very important to enable overview. There are a couple things that we added to this in the guide. For example, there are legacy systems that have a maximum number of users, and they've been reached already for years, and opening it up to other systems or other services, you might reach a point where you can't actually use it, so you need to check it very well. And one is, of course, integrated security. Integrate the legacy security with the SOA security solution that you define. Next slide, please. So we went through a set of topics from the guide. There are more topics in the guide, but because of time constraints, we will not go through that. You are encouraged, and you will get the link later to read the guide. Quite a big part of the guide is about two case studies, and we use case studies, also more case studies when we talked about, to get these best practices. Also later on, to look at these case studies again, and looked at how could we improve actually the transformation with the best practices that we came up with. So we have a case study on a supply chain solution, and one about address management, and also about web service enabling legacy systems of a large telecommunications company. As you will see, we will go in quite detail in the guide through those case studies, and we end with a recommendation to improve that based on the SOA guide. And that's also what we want to encourage you to look at case studies, to look at your engagements, and to look at the guide, and to provide feedback on what you see, and also what you can actually add to the guide, because we can start like new work on getting more of your input in there. Next slide, and I hand over to TJ again.
So what we actually describes a brief overview of the guide, and we thought like it would be good to really provide you a little bit guidance on how you can utilize the guide. The best way we thought like it would be better for you to utilize the guide would be to assess the various business drivers as it's been outlined in the guide into your context or into your enterprise, and then consider the hooks we have been providing for the architecture development method of TOGAF when you're trying to tailor your enterprise architecture process. And select one of those modernization strategies, for example, re-architecting, re-hosting, or conversion of languages, and evaluate against these strategies during the process, how they are being measured and how the transformation has been happening, and confirm some of those SOA principles we have discussed in here in terms of granularity, in terms of decoupling the existing systems with other functionalities, and just try to utilize those principles in such a way that it would be providing more business agility to the enterprise. And if there are some patterns which are relevant, which are highlighted in this guide, and utilize those in your context. Consider advice for the people, organizations, processes, and technologies, and don't forget about the security aspects to it, because we have to really retest the whole functionality again while we're really doing the transformation. So security is really a key critical aspects to that one. And establish those metrics on return on investments and baseline them before the transformations and measure them during the transformation journey, and try to make sure that the business case has been laid out, is properly addressed, and utilize the ADM process, architecture development process, and the whole ADM life cycle to manage the transformation. Slide, please. So at this point, I think what we're really thinking about, we are also looking into a sequel to the guide. So if you have some of your L2 SOA journey, if you'd like to share your results and try to have an influence to the sequel to the guide, please provide us those feedback, and as well as the feedback on the guide itself. And you can contact the project team by this email routing, legacy-soa@opengroup.com. And at this point, I will hand it out to Simon for Q&A session.
Well, very much, TJ, and very much, Joost, for taking through that. Sorry, this is Chris. And Simon is giving it to me to do the Q&A. And in fact, we have had a couple of questions come in, and I'd ask people, please, if you have questions, to use the Q&A facility and to set visibility to everybody so that we can all see what the questions are. But the first one perhaps we could take up comes from Carlos Quiroga, and he's asking, what is the value of SOA maturity assessment? Know that there will always be a gap. So perhaps we go to the business case rather than to normal security assessment, I think is what he's driving at. So perhaps, I don't know, TJ or Joost, could you perhaps expand on the role of a SOA maturity assessment in the legacy evolution process?
Yeah, let me try to answer that, Chris. And Carlos, thanks for the question. The SOA maturity assessment, how we use it in the guide is really to provide input, for example, also for the migration planning phase. SOA maturity assessment tells where the organization is. It might also tell that the organization is not getting an SOA, does not have any SOA-enabled applications or an SOA infrastructure, which means that in the planning phase, the first thing to work on or to plan to an SOA environment ready. Of course, the business case, ROE and 2B architecture will absolutely be done, but it tells me about the current state of SOA level of the organization. That means mostly that it will influence my transition architectures and the planning in the whole evolution.
Okay. Yes, anything you want to add to that, TJ, before we go on to the next question?
No, I think you covered it. The maturity actually assessment provides what the current state is and how you need to transform and what are your business drivers really needed to transforming those matured into a target maturity state. And the business drivers actually drives those things, and it transformed that in such a way so you could measure them, as we go along in this transformation journey. So it is actually the business case has already been provided, and maturity assessment is one of those transformation journey action items you would do to really baseline your current and then progress forward as you go into the transformation journey. So, if you don't mind, Chris, before going to the next questions, there is a reference sections in the last slide which people would like to see, or maybe some of those links we have provided, how you can download the guide, and there is a tutorial version of the guide is also available, so you can download that as well. And if you need to go into what the L2 SOA project, how you can come into work on the next version or sequel of the guide and possibly addressing another hot topics, for example, cloud computing with SOA. So, those things would be coming into those. So here are some of those links. So sorry, Chris, go ahead on the other questions.
Okay, thanks, TJ. Made a comment on your answer to that question. It is more than as is bridge phase, but the maturity assessment doesn't document the compelling reason to act to go to the desired evolution. Is a point that he's making, and I guess the maturity assessment is one of the things you take into account. It's not all rationale for doing the legacy evolution. I don't know if you want to go further. If not, we could move on to There are some other questions which we'll take as to where we can get the presentations and how much does the guide cost and so on. We can take at the end. The guide actually is free, but we can take where to find it at the end. It's a question from Banana Vadivel. Can we have an example of loosely coupled and tight coupled? It's really a general question, but I don't know perhaps whether you've got any thoughts on loose and tight coupling as it relates to legacy evolution, and whether perhaps the fact that legacy systems are more likely to be tightly coupled, and whether that gives you a problem. Yes, Jay, who let's take that one first.
I think there are lots of examples depending on where you look at in the systems and in the architecture. For example, tightly coupled might be that you have lots of code that is actually not modularized, and that's actually calling all kinds of parts in the code, maybe a lot of input calls. It's so tightly coupled that actually it's very difficult to see the structure within a system, but also be able to use part of it by other systems. You will create redundant code, which is easier to call. Another one is, for example, database links is tightly coupled, where it's very difficult to see databases are actually linked to each other, and when the link breaks, then most executing runtime, you see that, hey, the link broke, while loosely coupled will probably be that have put that in the stack on the business logic level. So different examples and different types of coupling. That's the answer.
And just to add on what Eustace already describes, the SOA principle about having a business contract, or actually the interface contract, really abstract the technology implementation from the usage of it. So when it's loosely coupled, you can integrate different services in a flexible manner, and there is a seamless integrations, and you can provide more reusage if it is loosely coupled. If it's tightly coupled, then you may have to have some issues if you need to reuse those functionalities. So that's it.
Okay, so thanks, Gerald, and for that one. As a specific question, Anton, on where can I get more information about the metrics mentioned, how they're decomposed in measurable, more specific things, what's used, and so on. I don't know how far that's put within the guide, or whether you'd have to look outside for, if you like, for specific metrics.
Yeah, that's a very good question. The description of the guide actually describes the metrics, and we haven't really gone into the implementation aspects, how you could, collect them and, report that out. But we are actually considering in the sequels to enhance the metric sections, as well as how you could use the different deployment models. So, your question is very valid, and guide highlights some of those, metrics, and as well as how you can measure them in different transformations. But it's not very prescriptive at this point in time. But certainly take that advice and try to address them in the sequel of the guide.
Okay, thanks for that, TJ. I think one more quick question before we move on to the general, where do you get it from, how much does it cost, and so on. A specific question, thanks for this question, Philip. I know how you can calculate or estimate the ROI in phase A before you have defined the target architectures in phases B, C, and D. This relates to slide 12 or 13.
Thanks for this.
Have a go at that one.
Yeah, this is TJ. Thanks for the questions. We are really suggesting in in the guide as well as in the ADM process of the TOGAF is you identify what kind of matrix you would be measuring against the transformations process, and you identify those, and then you further elaborate in the phase B, C, and D sections how that would be done. And so what is I think probably discussed in this webinar was identify those matrix in the preliminary and the vision sections of it, especially in the vision section, and then further elaborate once you have the target architecture defined. You want to clarify further, or?
Yeah, it's indeed a matter of granularity, right? So in phase A, you already work on a first version of the architecture on a very high level, and that means that you identify those metrics, and you already on a high level work on ROE, and it will be more detailed when you go through these target architectures. So it's a matter of granularity.
Yep. Thanks.
Okay. Thanks for that answer. I think as our time is close, we should wrap up. Questions: how do we obtain a copy of the guide, and how much does it cost? Well, link here. Download the L2 SOA guide. That's where you obtain a copy. You can obtain it and other Open Group standards from the Open Group bookstore. You get that from the Open Group homepage and click on the tab for the bookstore. It costs nothing. This is free to download, as are most Open Group standards and guides. There was a question as to whether it provides a reference to the SOA maturity framework, and I'm pretty sure that it does. And again, that's available. OSIM, O-S-I-M-M, Open Group Service Integration Maturity Model, is available again from the Open Group bookstore, and there's a specific reference in the guide. And finally, I think there was a question about the availability of this presentation and this webinar, and perhaps Simon, you can confirm and how the recording will be made available for people.
Yeah, Chris, the recording will be available from tomorrow, and it's registered for this event. We'll get an email with a URL to access that recording. Okay.
So I'd like to thank again TJ and Joost for this excellent webinar, and to thank Simon for setting it up, and most importantly to thank everybody who participated, both those who asked the questions and those who listened, for your attention, and thank you all, and we hope we'll see you again at other Open Group webinars. Many thanks to everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chris.